Hey everyone, I'm really excited to be here today to talk about the accountability equation and how we can bridge those gaps in our business when it comes to accountability with our leadership teams as group practice owners. So I want to start first by explaining who I am for those of you who don't know me. My name's Maureen Werbach. I'm an LCPC here in the state of Illinois. I've been a therapist since 2007. And I describe myself as an introverted person. I'm an immigrant born in Europe, first gen college student here, cisgender, lesbian. I'm autistic and ADHD, and I'm a white woman. I am the owner of Urban Wellness, which is a group practice here in Chicago. I have a handful of locations and have been around since 2012 as a group practice owner. I also own the Group Practice Exchange, which is a consulting business that helps people grow and scale their group practices. I'm a speaker, a business consultant, and a podcaster, but I really like to identify in the business landscape as a visionary, a creative, and ideas generator. That's where I get a lot of my zest from is coming up with ideas, being creative, and really sitting in that visionary seat. So that's enough about me, and let's get to what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to be just walking through what I call the 5 A's of accountability and how you can get thinking on how to build accountabilities in your group practice. So the accountability equation, or AE as I like to call it, has 5 core concepts within it, and those 4 concepts are assemble, assess, assign, audit, and action plan. We're going to walk through it in today's training, but essentially assemble is creating roles and functions for your business. So scrapping the idea of an organizational chart and really outlining what the core roles are, not the job titles, but the roles and what those core functions or responsibilities are. Then assessing that you have the right people in the right seats in your leadership team. Then assigning clear accountability and a coaching process so that you can coach your team to success. Then going into audit is auditing your team's accountability with a tracking system with KPIs, or key performance indicators. And then lastly, action planning, where we create meeting agendas that actually bring results and is something that you can review regularly. So you're not setting up accountabilities and having this spreadsheet of accountabilities that nobody ever actually ends up looking at. So accountability equation will help you measure your practice in a very specific way. I have this sort of flow here that you'll see. It's a program that's designed to help mental health group practice owners create accountability systems that reduces linchpins, that reduces redundancies and gaps in accountabilities while helping everyone in your business understand their roles and responsibilities. Accountability systems aren't new. The problem that I see is that a lot of these accountability programs miss key components to the overall picture of accountability setting. And that's where, the accountability equation comes in. I like to look at accountability from this visionary lens. As I mentioned, I am very much a visionary. And if you're a group practice owner, you likely are too, since the concept of creating a business comes from a visionary perspective. So essentially, we go through this kind of process of building out a blueprint, which just lets you know where you stand in your business currently when it comes to accountability. Are you getting your needs met? Is your business getting its needs met? It really opens up the foundation to seeing where there's gaps or holes that can be plugged. Then we build out our roles and functions matrix, which essentially is scrapping the idea of a accountability chart and instead implementing a sheet that shows all of the core roles in all of our group practices, along with those main functions or responsibilities that each of those roles plays. So you can plug anyone into it. It's not a matter of job titles, but more of what the core roles in a business are. And we all have the same core roles. Your practice and my practice might have some additional sub roles that are unique to our industry or to our specific business. We then have some leadership and business assessments that help you see from a business owner perspective if the leadership support you're needing is actually being given, and then an assessment for your current leaders as well as potential future leaders that you can use during the screening process to screen for actual leadership versus middle management. I think a lot of us have had the experience of feeling like we have people in leadership who look to us as business owners for direction. And so they're not really leading and owning results and fixing, issues from decisions that they've made. They're really expecting you to come up with a decision, let them know, and then they'll sort of implement it, which really is more middle management than true leadership. And if you have this right now, you might realize it still puts a lot of weight on your shoulders to manage all the things. We then shift into building our accountability tracker, which essentially is a sheet that lists out all the core responsibilities and measurable goals for them, along with that are time bound, that say when those goals need to be met, and whether or not they are on track or off track. And because yearly accountabilities are hard to meet initially, we create quarterly goals, right? Breaking down bigger goals into bite-sized goals is not new and something that's really important for us to be able to do so that we can see those small successes build up and we can catch ourselves along the way if we notice that an accountability isn't being met. Next, we go through coaching and learning how to truly coach our own leadership team, but then also teaching our leaders how to coach before they move to getting resentful or pipping or terminating their team. At the end of the day, the only way that our teams can be successful is if we create an environment and a coaching process that allows them to learn and be able to be successful. Otherwise, sort of throwing them out there and then telling them what they need to do. And if they don't meet it, pipping or terminating them really is us as leaders not setting up our teams for success. And then we create our dashboards, which have all of our KPIs, those key performance indicators that let us know if we're actually meeting those accountabilities. And then lastly, creating those leadership team meetings every week, or for me, it's bi-weekly, so that we know, are we actually meeting those accountabilities? That's what we're reviewing every single week or every 2 weeks, and then making sure that we're reviewing and updating regularly. So, how working on accountability can positively influence your business. I'm assuming if you're watching this that you already know accountability can positively influence your business, but I want to sort of hammer that in. So organizational culture is obviously a really hot topic these days. You've likely yourself dealt with bad bosses and bad workplace culture while staying at your job because back in our day, resumes had to have job longevity or else something was wrong with you or me as an employee. So we would stay on 1+ years, even if we didn't like our workplace environment, because longevity was what was looked at as most valuable. These days, things are drastically different. People aren't staying in bad workplaces, and short-term jobs on a resume don't produce like the side eye anymore. People want to work at a place where they have a strong foundation and a culture that promotes autonomy and support and growth. So accountability gives everyone in an organization a clear foundation for what's expected of everyone, the direction that the organization is going in, and buy-in to help people move the organization forward because that's ultimately the goal. So that's one. Two, change is really hard, especially in the workplace. If you have employees, you'll realize very quickly that change is hard for a lot of people. One of the primary complaints that most employees will make is across any industry is around change. Either that they fear change, they don't understand why change is happening, not feeling like they have a voice in the organization and the changes that are being made. And then the second thing is the issue of like siloed departments. And I don't know if you know this, but like, have you ever worked somewhere where the work that you were doing in your department in a project or a service that you were doing, it didn't transfer over to the next department that is supposed to take that over and implement it? That is siloed departments, a lack of communication and understanding of what each part of the organization is doing to further the mission, to move the vision forward in an organization is really important. Accountability clarifies those roles and responsibilities of each department, along with the goals within them that help move that needle forward. So, AE really brings in an ironclad system of accountability that removes silos and reduces resistance to change. Also, think about a time when you felt valued as an employee. It likely related to a job where you knew exactly what you were doing, you knew what your responsibilities were and what your role was, and your skills and your interests aligned with that role. So, AE will improve morale by helping the right people be in the right seats. This will be able to help them accomplish their accountabilities and see how their role is really important to the success of the business. So no more confusion, no more ambiguity. So also, communication issues come from leadership, whether we like it or not. Leaders model what communication looks like within an organization, and AE establishes a clear line of communication through structured meeting agendas and clear accountabilities that are transparent throughout the organization. 5, when we know the role that each of us plays in an organization, where our responsibilities start and end, and when and where the baton gets handed off to someone else, it increases collaboration and support among team members. And AE helps leaders and their teams work side by side towards a goal rather than me versus you when an accountability problem arises, which a lot of times happens, right? Something um, you as a leader notice something is happening with a team member of yours. And for that team member, it can feel like it's you coming to them and saying, this problem is on your end. This is what needs to be fixed. And accountability really puts us side by side so that we're looking at the problem ahead of us, and you as a leader and them as an employee in your business are working together towards resolving that issue versus, me versus you. 6, in organizations, values and vision are only going to be as true as the employees who believe and live it. So when an organization has really clear roles and responsibilities, it ends up weeding out employees who aren't a good fit for the future of the organization. And it increases the success of hiring employees who fully align with your vision and your mission. 7, clarity is king. When candidates fully understand their role that they are applying to and accepting, it reduces the likelihood of this well-known wrong person in the wrong role scenario. That scenario is really draining. I've been in that scenario, and I'm sure you have too. And I've worked with so many business owners who've had bad hires because they weren't really clear on the role and they didn't explain the things that they would be accountable for in that role. And then after hiring that person either didn't have the skills needed for it or didn't have that willingness or drive to do those things. Um, Lastly, it bears repeating, but accountabilities that align with the mission and the vision of the organization creates this full clarity across every person in an organization. People who don't align with that mission will just naturally feel this pull to leave, recognizing that they're not a fit for the future of the organization. And so AE just hammers out those accountabilities so that people truly understand, do I fit in here? Is this an organization I want to be a part of? Are the roles and the responsibilities that I've agreed to truly roles and responsibilities that I want to be a part of? All right, so let's talk about the power of assembling, which is the first A. Building your journey of accountability starts with thinking about your roles and your functions within your business. So we want to look at this from the perspective of where it should be, not where it currently is. So if you look at what the roles and the responsibilities of your business are right now, you want to scrap that idea just for this scenario, because if we look at the roles and responsibilities and we try to assemble your roles and functions based off of where you currently are, you're going to run the risk of building out roles and functions that really keep you stagnant. Ones that feel a little less risky because they're going to keep the status quo or only create very minor changes to your current situation. And this typically happens because we're afraid to make our team upset with change. So we instead try to create roles and functions that have very specific people in mind. Usually it's going to be those that are already currently in a leadership role, rather than taking that human element out of the equation and building out roles and functions that are actually in alignment with the vision of your organization. All right, so what are roles and functions? They're essentially positions and responsibilities that are necessary for an organization to reach its goals. So roles are specific positions in an organization that have their own set of responsibilities and expectations. They're not job titles. Job titles don't tell a story of the role that they play in an organization, and it doesn't tell you what responsibilities fall within those titles. They're very obscure. What one organization might call a clinical director, another might call a supervisor. And so the idea of job titles is really hard to solidify, and a role is much easier. So a role along with functions, those responsibilities within that role give a very clear picture of what gets done and gives everyone an understanding of who's responsible for what. So I want you to screenshot this page because these are the core functions that our industry has. So you can take this screenshot and do this on your own. But essentially what the core roles are outside of a visionary and an integrator. So visionary usually being the business owner, and an integrator, which is typically the person that oversees everyone. And a lot of times for smaller group practices, the owner is going to be that visionary and integrator, but everyone else falls here. You have someone who's in charge of sales and marketing. You can list down below that what are the core responsibilities of a person in sales and marketing in your organization. Then we have operations, which I split into three: admin operations, HR operations, and clinical. So admin operations is usually the person that is in charge of the front and the back of house administratively. HR operations is usually someone in charge of recruiting, interviewing, hiring, employee issues, HR issues, exit interviews, things like that. And then clinical operations is going to be typically someone like a clinical director. So that's someone who's in charge of the clinical team, everything related to the clinical team. Then we have someone who will be in charge of all HR operations, someone in charge of DEI, and someone in charge of finance. And so if you look at this across the board, you might be thinking, I don't have anyone in charge of sales and marketing, or I don't have anyone in charge of HR. Well, if you don't have anyone, it means that it naturally just falls on you, whether you're doing it or not. So now is a great time to start listing out what those core responsibilities are within each of these roles in your business, and it'll give you an idea of if you're currently doing it, what you might need to be doing within that role, or if you're ready to hand it off, what it'll help you then build out a job description that accurately explains what the responsibilities of that role is going to be. All right, two, the power of assessing. So after you finalize your roles and functions, it's going to be really important to take the time to assess your team to make sure that the right people are in the right seats. You might notice that the people that you currently have in certain positions in your practice might no longer fit very neatly within those new roles and the responsibilities that you've created. And you might need to promote or demote or change or realign people's roles. Or you might realize you don't have people in certain roles and you need to hire new people for different things. So a quick way to do that is to look at the 7 key areas to consider when you're screening for your leaders. So take a screenshot of this as well. This will help you when you're screening for current leaders, is looking for vision alignment. So like, do they have a clear understanding of the vision of your company? Effective communication. For example, do the leaders provide regular feedback and coaching to their team members? Next is decisive decision-making. Are they transparent and ethical in their decision-making? These are just some sample questions, but you can add questions to this that align with these core areas to screen for. Culture building, do they possess strong emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills? Accountability, how are your leaders responding to failure or not, or making mistakes? Strategic thinking, do leaders stay current with industry trends and changes that are happening in the business? And resilience and adaptability, are the leaders able to pivot or adjust to the company's strategies as, we need to make changes to the landscape of our industry? So these are some questions that you can ask yourself when you're screening for new leadership, and questions that you can ask your current leaders to see if they are a good fit for the role. The third A is assign. So once you've assembled your roles and functions and assessed your current team and their fit within those roles and functions, your leadership team will then work together to build your accountability tracker. So that's a system that will be the hub for all of your leaders to ensure that they're working towards the greater vision of your organization. You'll also ensure that your leadership team learns how to coach their teams to success. So assigning accountabilities does not mean just handing off tasks to people. Too many employees in an organization have long task lists with no accountability and no ownership of outcomes. And being accountable involves being proactive and results oriented and having that sort of mindset where leaders are actively, they have like an active drive and a desire to monitor progress, to take ownership of challenges and setbacks, and to make any sort of necessary adjustments or changes to achieve their goals. So I want you to think, how often have you felt like you needed to micromanage your team or hound them for information on the things that they're working on because you just don't know what they're working on or what their progress is? Or you just maybe don't have any idea on how certain areas of your business are functioning because you don't have a clear system for tracking and seeing that progress. That's what the accountability tracker is the antidote to. It not only makes it really clear who's accountable for what various things in your business, but it also provides the objectives and the due dates to make things happen. So there's no more confusion. There's no more finger pointing that I thought you were supposed to do this and they think you were supposed to do it. Everyone knows their expectations. And you no longer have to explain to someone why they're not meeting expectations because it's just naturally, the tracker is naturally telling that story. So once you build accountabilities, one of the biggest concerns arises is when accountability isn't met. Leaders fumble through trying to support their teams to success with very little strategy or no strategy at all. You might notice that some leaders just ignore the problem until they become resentful. Others might engage in some passive discussions in order not to make their team members upset. And others might go right to giving their employees a performance improvement plan. Coaching is the antidote to that. And this is what I suggest to be the first course of action before putting any sort of performance improvement plans in place. It'll help really ensure that people are given the tools to succeed. Racism and oppression are systemic issues that show up in a lot of ways, including in ways that leaders set accountability measures. So when leaders are not aware of their own biases, they may make decisions that disproportionately affect or impact those of marginalized groups. And so it's important for leaders to be aware of how racism and oppression can show up in their use of accountability measures. And AE talks a lot about ways that oppression shows up during accountability setting and questions to ask yourself as a leader from an anti-oppressive stance when it comes to accountability. So another screenshot page for you here. So when you're creating your accountabilities, I wanted to share one example of what it looks like, and below is a blank one that you can use to make your own spreadsheet, and it has the core things that you want to be tracking. So you want to look at the roles. And remember, I mentioned here in the beginning, these are the core roles. Each of these roles, sales and marketing, operations, HR, DEI, finance, are all going to be listed in this tracker in the first column. The person who's accountable for that role, it might be like in the clinical role, you might have multiple people who have accountabilities in the clinical role, like someone who's in charge, like the clinical director. You might have some supervisors, some site supervisors, some provisional, like if you have a training team, you might have supervisors who just provide supervision to pre-licensed people. What is the result you're looking for? So I have an example here. For a supervisor, the result is that their supervisees need to have their notes completed within 1 week, right? That's the result that's expected in this example. How do we make this measurable? What's the measurable goal? In this example, less than 5% of all notes will be incomplete every week, right? That's very measurable goal. I always say don't have everything at 100% because that will mean that people fail all the time. Nothing is ever perfect. And so in this example, their goal is that all of their clinical team members will have their notes done within a 1 week period, and that no more than 5% of people's notes will be late. And then currently at is what you're going to write in where they're currently at. So in this example, currently at 4% incomplete notes per week. So that means that they are reaching their goal. They're on track. They're below the 5% marker. If they were off track, you would just check off track and write in 7% of notes were incomplete in a given week, or 10%, whatever it is. And then what is the goal time frame? Are you looking at it weekly? Are you looking at it monthly, quarterly? And then what is that due date? And that's a very simple way of tracking accountabilities and building those accountabilities out for everyone. It's very clear what the result is. It's very clear how you measure that result. And it's very clear where your business is currently at on any given accountability. All right. We then go to audits. So once we've assigned accountabilities to our team, we want to audit. That's the fourth of the 5 A's. So in auditing, what you're doing is wanting to build out key performance indicators that literally let you know what you need to be tracking. Key performance indicators serve as a really vital tool in auditing. It offers a framework for tracking and evaluating the performance of your leaders and the roles that their team members play. So by aligning your KPIs with specific responsibilities and objectives, organizations can foster a culture of accountability and drive success at every level of the organization. And so very clearly or quickly, I want you to take a screenshot again. And this will allow you to look at this once this training is over, because some of these are a little bit of homework sheets that I want you to be able to do once we're done here. And this is helping you come up with your metrics. So on the left side of the screen, you'll see that I have in all of the core roles put in some of the main things, the main KPIs that most group practices track. So like in administrative, for example, tracking what the inquiry demographics are, what are the appointment types that are most commonly coming into your practice, where are referrals coming mostly in from, what insurance types are calling most, what percentage of people who inquire actually schedule an appointment, and what percentage of those who schedule their intake session actually attend that first intake appointment. What are the reasons for inquiries not scheduling an appointment, right? So here's some core KPIs that you might be tracking. You might be tracking even more within these, but on the right-hand side here, start listing some of those key performance indicators that your business tracks when it comes to these core roles, as well as ones that maybe you aren't tracking, but you should. This is all going to play a role in whatever is being tracked. You want to make sure someone is accountable to creating a measure where those KPIs should be, like what makes that measurement successful or not successful. And lastly, we have an action plan. So I think the most useless process that most business owners go through is to track metrics and do nothing with them, to not look at them regularly, to look at them and sort of move on without any action. Action is the fifth and last part of the accountability equation, and it's where you and your leadership team take all the information you have at your fingertips about the goals and the accountabilities and the metrics of your practice, and you take action to move the needle forward. Because without action, there's no accountability. So I think accountability is fine and dandy, and of course necessary in business, but most business owners have difficulty reaching those overarching results in their accountability trackers because they don't have any sort of process for breaking that down into smaller goals. And so having a meeting agenda, a weekly or biweekly, which is what I do, meeting agenda that focuses on every week looking at your accountability tracker and making sure that every person in leadership is letting each other know if they are on track or over or off track, and then setting up micro quarterly goals that help them reach those larger goals is going to be what moves that needle forward. And it helps you and your leadership team if they look like they're not going to be able to meet that accountability, and it allows them to course correct. So screenshot time. Here is an example, visual of action planning. You have, for your accountability to be met, you build an accountability tracker. I'm working from right to left now, but you have your accountability being met, right? The way it does is you have your accountability tracker that has all the accountabilities that over the course of a year, your core leadership team should be accountable for. The way those get done is by breaking them down into quarterly goals that allows you to make it a little bit more bite-sized. Those quarterly goals are what you are going to be working on, and your leadership team will be working on in those biweekly or weekly leadership team meetings. So let's say you have a yearly goal of hiring 12 people. You break it down. Let's say I'm making it very quick right now, but break it down into quarterly goal that says, let's say 4. And we're assuming that no one quits, right? In this example. So breaking down the yearly accountability of 12 new hires into a quarterly goal of 4. Now, in a biweekly meeting, if the person who's in charge of hiring is like, man, we're really not getting a lot of inquiries, a biweekly goal might be to 1 week research what are the new places to be able to put in a job description to bring in new inquiries, right? That is a goal, a small biweekly goal that that person can do that is going to support that quarterly goal of bringing in 4 new people, right? Sometimes research is part of that goal. So breaking down an accountability being met into these 3 categories is the way that we make it a little bit more bite-sized so that it's easier to make movement. So in this screenshot, if you want to try this out on an accountability you might have that in a year is expected, breaking it down quarterly and then breaking it down even more, you can do that in the bottom boxes right there. All right, and lastly is finding your integrator. I didn't talk a lot in this training about integrators because that could be a whole training in and of itself, but an integrator is the person who, and this might be you, is the person that makes sure all of this is being done. So if you're a business owner who feels like you cannot be the glue that holds all of these pieces together, it might mean that it's time for you to bring on an integrator. And I can help you with that as well beyond this training. But you can also look up what an integrator does. Essentially, the quick answer to it is that they're the glue that holds all of the various departments together. They know what the accountabilities for the whole organization is, and they're there to support all of those departments, making sure that they're working together to move the needle forward in your organization as a whole. All right, so that is essentially the accountability equation. If you're interested to learn way more in depth than this half-hour training can do, you can take a screenshot here and download my book, which is The Accountability Equation. And I hope you enjoy it. Have a great one, everyone.